you don't watch yourself on the screen while you're doing it.
I probably will.
Awesome. So let's go anyway. So we've just had a listen to the piece, and I used to get videoed at uni all the time. Whole lectures would be recorded, and it's like so confronting. But anyway, so it should be used. Just pretend it's not there. You're fine. Hey, so we'll have a look. We've just had a listen to the piece, and if we consider what's going on, like just what is there in terms of duration. So I guess you have to sort of have a bit of a frame of, you know, you're framed up by, you're looking essentially through a lens of sad. What is sad? And what elements might lend themselves to sadness? They might not become apparent straight away. So I guess you have to just be flexible enough to go, well, 12/8 might actually not be, or it could be very relevant to your discussion, depending on what you're sort of framing it on as well. Cool, so good to go. If you just think about duration, what's there? What are some elements or features of the piece that you could talk about or mention in terms of its duration?
Lots of slurs.
So, okay, so slurs potentially, so connecting rhythms together essentially in that.
That thing where the first violin misses the first sort of beat.
There's
Yeah.
missing
Thing.
Yeah, I'll just make that bigger for people playing at home. Alright, cool. So here, I guess one thing not to overlook first up, 12/8. That's a fact, that's what it is, 12/8. So what you've got there, of course, is all those suckers. So that's your pulse kind of thing. Yeah. So you can essentially break it into 4 beats, but it's just got a triplet or 3 sort of feel to it. So 12/8, is that relevant? It might become relevant later on, you don't really know yet. So the other comment was this, in the purple here, so you sort of, whoops, supposed to be a rest. So that's your sort of general pattern going through as well. So that's a quite prominent durational feature of the piece. I guess you have to keep in mind how that interacts with this as well. Okay, so together, if you sort of look at this together, this whole pattern, come over to here. You've sort of got this effect going, where that's like low and high. So you've still got that like momentum going forward, and that's really emphasised, but at quite a low range and low pitch range. And then up here you've essentially the high voices, you don't hear the first one, you just hear this low sort of thuddy kind of quite low down note almost. Well, that's not super low, but the general impression of the whole piece when it's playing is that it's a lower note that isn't probably discerned as much as those moving parts. So they sort of come to the fore a little bit more. Cool. Anything else durationally in there? In the whole piece. So Jake, I think mentioned slurs before, so probably ties is a better durational term to use. Slurs and the use of those slurred notes or connected sort of notes is probably more a pitch thing in this instance, so we'll come back to that. What's the general sense of the flow of the music?
legato.
It's quite legato, yeah, so you could probably pop that in our durational thing as well. So it's an expressive device as well, so legato or smooth. I don't know if it's helpful if I write on there. It's got this sort of, sorry Ash.
Oh no, that's
good.
no work.
Cool, and I'll take a photo of this too before I check it up as well. Do you know what you can do though? Like this is, this component here, this entire block that is sort of pretty much repeated later on. There's heaps in that alone that you could talk about, an awful amount of that alone. So I guess you're sort of looking at this as like the pressure point or like the step, the step to go up to here. It sort of steps up and sort of makes it, gives it a sense of forward motion. So combined, that sense of forward motion I think is really important. It's also quite fluid as well. It just sort of happens, and that sort of could tie in with that idea of legato or smooth. All good? Cool. Anything else in terms of duration on there?
Well, the piece is generally slurs.
Yeah, so some very basic sort of commentary on it, which we need to do. So piece. Yeah, that's right. Maybe you can see green. So overall, it's slow duration. Can you see that actually?
Yeah.
Just. because the duration's so slow, that beep will do something weird. Still happy? Turn that head on. Because it is so slow, I have a sense that the note values are generally like a longer sort of feel. I can't even see that. So it generally has a longer drawn out sort of feel, even though like you might look at that and say, yeah, well they're fast moving notes, but in the context of such a slow moving piece, it's actually not super fast. That's the quickest note value, the quaver. It's the fastest note value in the piece. And essentially just goes 1, 2, 3, quaver, quaver, quaver. So that's the pulse. And it's sort of naturally emphasising 1, 2, 3. So it's not really fast, but it's this allows it to be smooth or fluid. This pattern, that's broken up into 3, subdivided into 3s. And the fact that it is just a really slow tempo helps a lot as well. Hey, I might take a photo of that. Is that cool? And I'll upload it to our page. Bingo. All right. Anything else about what you see on the screen there? Anything else durationally? I think we'll look at the vocal part. So if we have... Okay, there's a few different bits. Let's have a look at this block here. Okay, what durationally is happening there? We've used words like fluid and smooth already. Slow duration obviously applies to that as well. But what are some other things you could say?
It's kind of offbeat.
Yeah, it sort of has notes that are not on beat, like emphasised.
Is it not following a certain rhythm, it sort of goes low and close?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's probably still quite sort of on the beat-ish though, isn't it? So you've got a beat there. Here it gets a bit too. There's beat 3, beat 4. So it's still sort of quite on the beat. But I know what you mean about this part. That's the bit you mean, isn't it?
That bit.
So I think that's a pitch thing as well that you're thinking. The pitch sort of goes like this. But like in terms of metrical beat patterns and things like that, it's still fairly okay. It has, okay, if you're just thinking durationally, it has that sort of sense of, like the rhythm is quite sort of fluid still, isn't it? So there's your rhythm there. That's sort of quite, just sort of fluid and just moves along. Okay, so the beat is emphasised, especially the strong beats, beat 2, beat 1 and 3, sort of emphasised. And it also emphasises the important vowels, doesn't it, as well, just to sort of help get that message across, I guess is what you're really looking at there. And that's just mimicked throughout all parts. Okay, cool. It's hard, I don't know if there's anything else durationally we really need to talk about, because what I'm finding really hard to do is not talk about pitch and stuff in here, because they sort of come together. So I'll just get rid of that. Let's have the squiz through. So anything durationally that jumps out at you, see how it's all pretty much the same? Of course, here it just goes into like just climb up a ladder essentially, kind of effect right there, emphasise. Or actually, you could probably say that emphasising the beat here.
There's a lot of rests, isn't there? The notes got very short notes in themselves.
Yeah, so it's really pointed and sort of going somewhere and like determined almost.
It goes from the short note values rising to the sort of longer note values.
Yeah, so there's contrast here. If you look at the two sides of that marking there, you've got so short on this side and long on that side. So is there like some tension or contrast might be a better word? Tension or contrast? This is sort of, for me, this is a bit determined, as in to sort of not get out of the situation or anything. It's like, I'm going to survive. See how I'm immediately drawing it back into the context? It's hard to just to pull it apart in isolation from anything. Hugh, we're making a video for you. A video. I've just videoed it all.
Cool.
Hey, so basically, yeah, we're stepping up, sort of determined to beat this almost, and then we're almost not give up, but sort of more resigned to the fact that, and that's my judgment on this as well. You're resigned to the fact it's long. It's sort of a bit more relaxed. It's not as rhythmic and powerful. It just sort of smooths and flows through. In terms of the note durations used, so short versus long. Okay. All good. So what I'm desperately trying not to do is start to talk straight away about, okay, so there's so many other things at play here, like harmony and pitch and expressive devices. So that's for you to sort of talk together. So all of this stuff will go up, video will go up. I'll do all of this stuff to sort of help unpack it. It's up to you, I guess, to go, that's a really good thing, I'm going to push that with this one. Okay. My daughter Melly loves a show called Odd Squad. Has anyone seen Odd Squad? Okay, it's like these kids that own this detective agency, and there's these, all their gadgets are numbered, and they have to it's like, I need gadget 14 to solve this problem, so here's part 7 and plus part 7. If I put them together, that makes the gadget I need, kind of thing. It's sort of like that. You're like looking at all these bits going, I'll take that one, to connect it into one kind of idea. Cool. Odd Squad reference. Cool. So, okay, so the contrast between long and short there, potentially? Something we could look at? I dare say that's most of what we're doing. The same pattern is repeated. Pretty much the same pattern as the vocal part in the instrumental lines. So just reconfirming that idea. Very smooth, fluid legato. All this stuff we've talked about, smooth, fluid legato, kind of movement through there. Just in terms of rhythm. Same patterns again. I've seen almost nothing different so far. Durationally here, like it really pulls back, as you know, as you would have noticed. Oops. Can't even draw an arrow. So it really pulls back. So a big sort of, that's not the right word. Like a big rit. So it pulls all the way back. It's really sort of pronounced kind of feeling. This, feeling that creates this amen sort of cadence there. So it's very sort of drawn out, very long, elongated note, like long note values. You only have to listen to this line here to hear how much it pulls back. It takes forever to sort of end, so it really slows and winds down. So in terms of duration only, if you're talking about potentially in the context of death or sadness or dying, it's just like, you know, you're just exhausted, you give up, or you die, or you just go, okay, no, that's it, I can't go on any further or any longer. All good? I actually think that's pretty much all for duration. So there's not heaps in duration, but it does work with pitch quite a lot. Right. Guys, any questions so far? Anything else to add? Okay, cool. All right, next one along. So actually we might, do you want to skip, let's do pitch now actually, that's a big one. Okay, so if I talk about pitch, we've got sort of the three, I'm just looking above the board there, tonality, harmony and melody. So they all obviously interact, but it's often helpful to start with tonality because that frames everything else. And that's why I chose that picture to represent that word, that text with, or that meaning with. It's like the two adults and the children underneath. Like they sort of house everything that happens. So they're like the major family, so the children are little majors in there kind of thing. Okay, they're all the same time. So, what's the tonality of this piece? Minor. So it's minor key, because it's in the title as well.
It does switch into major for short passages.
Before we get there, that is very true. What minor is it in? D. Yeah, so it's in D minor. So the tonality is it's minor, and the detail to that is it's D minor. It's in the key of D minor for the bulk of the piece. So most of it is in D minor. That's C. So this score is a transposed score as well. So I guess to get a good look at the key to confirm, if you look at voices in obviously the natural sort of key. So B1 flat. The fact that it says in D minor but that sort of confirms it as well. So it's got that. So if you see ones without key signatures, they're just being transposed, so that's what they actually play. Cool. Anyway, so I guess the big thing to focus on here is the vocal parts when you're sort of doing any analysis of it. So in the key of D minor, if we look at, let's jump to melody now. So if we're talking about the melodic aspects of the piece, what would you say about how it moves, what it does?
It kind of starts low and then goes up high and then jumps high and then climbs down again. So it's like
Over the whole piece, you
Yeah,
mean?
not the whole piece.
Yeah.
It's kind of like within the bar over there.
Or the proposed start.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say? It goes up?
It goes up, like it goes up suddenly and then gradually comes down.
Oh, the shape of it? It's like
Yeah,
this?
it's the
kind of
shape
thing?
of it, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. It has like that kind of shape. It's like a breathing shape
Kind of
almost.
breathing waves
Yeah.
and stuff. Yeah.
Like the vocals sort of go up like arch and then throw in a section. Yeah.
That's right. It's like a miniature arch form. Well, it's not really an arch form, but has the shape of an arch kind of thing. The top line, that's the line you hear the most as well. Because if you look down here, it's like the opposite, isn't it? Pretty much. Others just do whatever they want to do. Cool. But if you have a listen to this, oh, not Gloom Sun.
Do you like the sound of a new...
Okay, sorry about that.
Whoa.
So it'll come on soon.
It's my choice, yeah.
But what I'll show you, like just that sense of that breathing as well. I know you can hear it. But anyone want to join the Defence Forces? Please? Oh, come on. Oh, what? Cool. You know, you can so you get that pronounce of that line. I almost don't hear that as much as this. So we're focusing on this breath sort of shape here, the vocal part. So it sort of rises up, sinks a little bit, turns into pitch, then starts again on the A, and the other side. So it's almost like so it goes legato smooth. Cool. So just from there,
Very chromatic, isn't it?
yeah, very. There's so much to talk about, so I don't know where to start almost with this. But if we go back to the fact that this is like it's almost like a breath-like sort of quality, where it's very fluid and very full of sort of this flowing sort of movement. Of course, that's a durational thing, but it's also a pitch thing in terms of how it moves and the steps that it takes. So you're starting on the A both times, and you're ending on the C sharp both times. So it's sort of going A and arcing over to C sharp. So it's sort of going somewhere still, in the sense that A is lower than C sharp, so it's climbing to C sharp. It's going somewhere, but still it's going up and sort of subsiding down again a little bit. Okay, and these parts are just providing that harmonic sort of support to that. Okay. As you look at the pitch as well, like for the most part, it's fairly smooth. It doesn't sort of jump around really angularly very much. So especially these parts here, there's like a little bit of a jump. But that's not like a massive jump musically. Like the contour is fairly smooth. So smooth, I'll write that over here.
Could you say it's
Sorry, Tess, yeah?
Could you say it's like melodramatic? That makes sense, but it's like really exaggerating. I don't know. Could you say
That's right. Do you know implicit? Is that right? Well, I think I was Ivanka Trump when I think that word, and I second guess whether I'm using it right now. But you know, you'll almost hear this shape in it as well, won't you? Like naturally, when the music's breathing in terms of pitch, it goes against human nature not to sort of go and get a bit bigger as well. So it's like real sense of sort of that breath. So that's sort of coming. Okay, that's three elements. So you've got duration, pitch, which is melody, and you've got expressive devices as well. So it's sort of got three little things wound up there quite tightly. If you then introduce the fact that the voices are doing it. You've got timbre in there as well. If you mention anything about how it's sort of structured in terms of that arch, you've got potentially structure as an element to talk about. So that's why sometimes it's unhelpful just to unpack the individual bits, because together they come close to come together to make more meaning sometimes. Okay, anything else there? So that breathing sort of sense, that smooth contour. So all of the lines, there's one little jump here in every single part pretty much, except for that one. That's like the only little hiccup on the road. The rest of it's fairly smooth. All good?
We go back to duration,
Yeah.
where the vocal parts are all sort of singing a long note, but they, for that second beat of each bar, they join in with the first violin, doing that quaver thing they do.
Do you want me to photo that before we look at it?
Yeah.
Yep. And then we'll have a look at what Ocean's talking about. Cool. So, what are we doing?
Oh, they like break up their longer note values. Oh, on the
Yeah.
still on the first page.
Oh, there. Sorry.
Yeah. If we go up a little bit, the like rhythm of the vocals.
Did you?
of the-
Oh, there.
Yeah, they like
Those
they do
bits
that.
go.
It sort of breaks up from doing long note values to doing a short one, which is, I don't know.
Just sort of connects the
Yeah.
parts together. Yeah. So they're not they're not sort of completely isolated from each other. Gloomy Sunday's a piece that does completely it's almost like two separate pieces put together at the last moment. This obviously is written in cohesive sort of way, so they come together. Yeah. So they sort of they don't imitate or anything, but they're just doing the same thing. Yeah. Cool. Hey, if we go to this part, so it dramatically changes, doesn't it, here? Where's mine? Alright, so if I get rid of this. Do you know what? I was talking to someone about this the other day. In terms of breaking it down harmonically, there's sort of no real point to doing it. You make a statement that it is potentially, and this is what will come up and has come up already, that it's chromatic. Okay, so there's chromatic movement in here. When you start seeing that's like G sharp, B natural, C sharp's your raised seventh, because you're in the key of D. Here is pretty much purely chromatic there. So it's more so talking about the chromaticism of the piece. So it doesn't stay within the diatonic harmony of D minor. It moves into chromatic space. So it's less about saying it's like this chord is E flat minor 7 or whatever it is. I have no idea, but without working it out. But it sort of doesn't matter. What matters is the tonality and the chromatic movement of it. So chromatic movement. So that's shown by these guys. You can hear it, of course, but you can see it in terms of note values that have accidentals on them that start appearing. So all of these suckers. Yeah. The part that you listen to the most, the soprano line here, climbs up in terms of pitch. And this is where it goes. This is where, again, it's really hard just to take away the fact that you've only got, you can't really easily talk about one element at a time. So you're just sort of stepping up here and heightening the tension through not only rhythm, but pitch and expressive devices like crescendo. Okay, so it's really growing up to say something really big. I'm actually finding this piece a bit harder to pull apart because it's so entwined. But we'll get there. It depends what you sort of want to do with it as well. Okay, so in terms of pitch, the set chromatic movement generally rising. And that's not every part all of the time, but there's a general sense of it expanding and rising, isn't there? General sense of expanding and growing and rising. So I'm sort of using like association kind of words already, which I'm trying definitely not to. So this part moves up, generally moves up, and if you go from there to the peak, generally sort of has an angular trajectory upwards, as does this one, C to F. And this is sort of just awkwardly floating around that central pitch, just destabilising it a little bit. which is a cool effect. So chromatic, it's like destabilization. Just made that up.
Destabilization. That sounds really complex.
It does, doesn't it? Well, it's just destabilizing it, isn't it? It's like, it's not quite, like it's on B flat here, to A, then to C, then to B natural, then to B. So it's just sort of floating around. It's like the menace underneath. Just underneath that, causing havoc. And these guys are growing and expanding. So, cool. So there's quite a bit of pitch stuff in there that you could talk about. But if you then go back and talk about the fact that it's rising in pitch, you could make that argument I sort of made before about your sort of a bit more like really pointed, determined, and then a bit more relaxed over here. You could argue that it's more committed there, though, because it sounds more. I'll just play it again.
Sounds like more's going on when they're holding it.
Yeah. I'm sort of not really quite, I don't know if I've made up my mind yet about it. So here it is. So that breathing sense. Then go back to the C sharp. So A. We hear that other voice the most. So much happening in there, isn't there? It's expanding. There's expansion happening because of the way the music grows out like that. It's the growth of the pitch, that chromatic sort of destabilised feeling underneath. It's the chromatic climbing up there. So it's breaking away from not the tonality. Well, the tonality is, in a way, it's sort of being threatened a little bit, like, or destabilised. Like, but it sounds very sad and minor still. It doesn't change into any key. It just sounds a bit like it's going somewhere. So it's what that does musically is just create tension. And music, to move forward, it has to have some tension always. Like, even a piece of pop music, EDM is a good example, where a lot of people think just drag and drop a bit of stuff around. And at grade 7 level you do, but they still have tension because they have like, you know, it'll sort of, like the bass drum beat might sort of go from quavers to semi-quavers to, and then a big drop happens, so that's the tension happening, and then the drop is the release. So the release, there's the tension building, and then it's almost like the drop is there, kind of. It's the same thing, it's exactly the same concept, it's just so different in terms of how it's put together.
That rise and fall thing is like throughout the entire piece, where the intensity...
This piece?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And especially in the, like, the melody of those, that...
Yeah, it's another
throughout
good...
the whole thing, like, rises and falls.
That's a good point. I'm going to come to that one actually now. Is that enough on that page? So it's just chromatically moving upwards, generally pitch-wise. This feels very awkward. I'll do it anyway. Okay. Hey, so the next bit we need to sort of line up, I think, is what Ocean was talking about. And that's this part here. So what's happening in terms of pitch here, there's quite a bit going on here. And this forms the basis of pretty much the entire piece of music. If I was analysing this to prove a point, I'd almost, this is not the right way or the only way, but I think there'd be a lot of merit in you going, you know, I might analyse the major features of this and where it happens. So like this as an idea, I'll analyse. This is an idea, I'll analyse. The climbing bit is another separate bit I'll analyse. And then you can then sort of step through it in terms of like linearly, like from bar 1 to bar 86 or whatever it is at the end. It's totally up to you. Or you could talk more about the themes or the associations it conjures. It's up to you. But whatever approach you take, don't discount stuff like this as supporting what you're trying to say. So if you say there's a really high degree of tension that generally resolves, then this is a perfect one to say. The one I had on the screen before, where they're sort of climbing up in pitch, the shorter, sharper notes and the longer legato thing and the drop, essentially, is another example of how it creates tension and releases it, kind of thing. And the release isn't complete release either, is it? It's sort of still there, just sort of subsides a little bit before it grows again. Because if you think about, if you're going to die, you're not going to be completely, well, very few people I think will be completely at peace. You'd be stressed, wouldn't you, or scared, or, you know, it's very massively confronting thing. Okay, so pitch-wise, what's going on here? That section there.
It starts and finishes on the 7th, doesn't it?
Does. Oh, I'm not going to go near green again. Another colour. I'm going to die when I watch this video though. Cool. Alright. So yeah, so Hugh said it starts and ends on the 7th. It does. So what's significant about that? It's the 7th. Okay.
It doesn't go back to D.
Yeah, here's D minor by the 7th. So what's to always resolve up? So it has a really strong tendency. So I wouldn't use green. It has a really strong tendency to want to go to D, so step up and resolve. But it doesn't always happen, does it? Even if you look at this chord here, it's not a D. Essentially. Actually, it is a D chord there. Sorry, there is a D chord there, but it's not in the part that carries the melody. It's the harmonic sort of basis under it. So it's actually the worst example I could have given because it is a D minor chord underneath. But it sort of comes off the A. So it does sort of resolve, but it doesn't sound convincing, doesn't it? Because the resolution has to go in that.
A makes it to resolve even more.
Yeah, it does. That's exactly right. So this, it's good to have these talks too. So that stretches the resolution out even more. That really big 6th interval there really sort of stretches out this delay, and then it doesn't resolve in this part. That's it. So it doesn't resolve in the melody. The chord's underneath D. Sorry. Okay, so you have got a D minor chord here, but it doesn't resolve in the melody. So it's left hanging a little bit because C sharp is just 7th degree. Probably one of the weakest, or the weakest degree of the scale. 3 and 7 are really weak. So if you're going, sorry, it's like the end of a mystery movie kind of thing. So it wants to resolve or go upwards to D, and it doesn't, and then it just starts on the C sharp again. If you look at it more, if you break it down even further, how it's moving, what have you got?
Overall shape, it's like up and down again.
What does that maybe remind you of? Breathing a little bit.
The waves as well.
And check this out. 2 up, 2 down. It's like big breath. Then a bit faster.
But
I
it
just
does
totally
the-
noticed
it
that.
does the bass plays like a crotchet, and then I don't know what I'm going for.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hold on a second.
Yeah, come out.
I get it. Come up on camera.
That's alright. I hope it's
Where
still
it's
recording.
like that imagery before. It's like,
Oh yeah, yeah.
very sort of.
Yep.
It's long and then short. In a way.
Oh, I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
The
Cool.
rests
It's
are on
like
the outside
sadness, like-
Yeah.
of the bar, isn't it? That's what gives it the kind of
Is that delay? Yeah. So it's just like that unit there alone is like a delay. Because that's missing, it's gone. So it's like a delay kind of, and then it comes in. It's not truly delayed, like that's just there. But it, melodically, because you listen, don't you just listen? Oh gosh. You just listen to this part. Oh my god.
What's your rotating
Let's go back. you have this really sort of pronounced sort of set of quavers that are disconnected and disjointed from the beat. So going back to duration again. Disjointed from the pulse or beat. It's probably the beat is a better word to use because they provide the pulse together. Anything else happening there? In terms of pitch, I think though that the shape of it too. You've got those little arch sort of shapes and breathing sort of shapes. So if breathing was one of your like themey things to look at, or last breaths, so like as a theme, association kind of thing, then it's really fragile. Like it's in such, like the range of this, it's really fragile, a bit sort of pathetic and hopeless. It's not sort of, not getting any traction because it's sort of constantly off the beat. Okay? So I've just talked about many elements in one go then as well. So anyway, so I guess the good thing about recording this is that you've immortalised this conversation by doing that. Actually probably not a good thing to celebrate. But you can sort of go back and like, oh, you'll constantly notice me talking about the bigger picture kind of thing in this, rather than just because you don't analyse music on that level for any meaning kind of thing. Like if you work out that's a C# minor chord, whoop-de-doo, what does it mean? So that's what you have to ask all the time. What does it actually mean? What does it contribute to what I'm trying to say? So all these little fragments I'm trying to give you and stay away from the themes, I'm pretty much failing at. But when I'm using words disconnected, disjointed from the beat, like it's a bit lost or a bit sort of fluid, that goes back into the idea of fluid, constant sort of motion, like there's all of this stuff, it all just links and intertwines so much. So what about, if we're still talking about melody and just the general shape of it, I think this arch form, that breathing sort of thing is a good thing to look at. The chromatic movement of the melody, I think it just creates tension. These voices here have a sort of rise and fall like that. The contour of it is quite important. Don't forget the contour of this one down here was that same sort of shape. So things like that. Does that feel okay? Photo time? And then we'll sort of move on. Any other melody things, do you think? Any other pitch things? Oh, actually there's a big one near the end, which we need to talk about. Is this helpful, guys?
Yes.
Yeah, totally.
Oh, good, good. I felt like I was floundering a bit. There's so much in it. It's just really hard to... You get sort of sidetracked by those different ideas all the time. The big... Okay, one other thing that I thought I'd just really quickly point out. If you have a look here, again, it's the same kind of theme again. That A sort of theme gets a bit more turbulent. Like some of these intervals are getting quite big, like octave jumps. So it's sort of like just pulling it out even more and get like more tension. So tension's sort of word of the week kind of thing. There's a bigger sort of jumps happening to sort of recalibrate itself almost. Right, 'cause there's some, like that gap is big. The gap, look at that huge gap between those. So it's really sort of there's quite big jumps. Is that significant in any way? Not straight to me, apart from that it's a little bit tense. But you've still got the fluidity of that pattern going. You've still got these threes going together. The sound of those threes happening. That's not compromised. I don't know. It's up to you guys.
What criteria would that grouping come under? The group
Yeah.
of three?
Duration. However, as soon as you put a label on like low and high, you're talking about pitch as well. Frustrating. Cool.
It's sort of like stupid in the first bar, that
Yeah.
A to F,
Yep.
the last.
Oh, hang on, where are you?
Yeah, there.
Here.
Yeah.
So treble, so F to D.
Yeah, like that last note from the quaver. So that's that F, yeah, that A to the F.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
what happens when it like rises over in the vocals.
Oh yeah, it does too. Yeah, cool. So it's just helping that big growth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, sorry for interrupting. I just got a message for you.
Oh, sure. Make sure it's video. You're right.
Chelsea says she's got the scan benefit from this and to look at, do you want to use the Nord or the Rustlings, but the Nord or the Grand? And if you want the Grand, can you just text her and she'll get it set up? Okay.
Maggie, the Nord's fine tonight? Do you want the Nord tonight? Might be better to
Oh,
control.
for Stedford?
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, sure.
perfect.
Yeah. Cool, sorry.
Thank you. It's okay.
I thought we're going to Flinders, and they.
Yeah, they've copied us and bought an order.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'll edit this out. Okay. Okay, so I totally won't edit it out. I'm just going to leave it in. So all good. Yeah. So with that bit, it's just I guess they're becoming more turbulent. If you look at things like they're weirdly marked here, like the fortissimo, 14 marks. That's bigger, softer. So it's just like trying to push the tension up a little bit by having bigger jumps, and then it's like suddenly big. The vocals are sort of all sort of floating along as they do. Floating is another idea potentially. Okay, where I was going. See, like that common theme, that like you can pick up any page and that 2-note fragment is there all the time. Okay. If you want to make the case of that breathing sensation, then check this as another one there, bigger form of it, and the inversion of it there. Yeah. So if you look at that breathing figure again, I've just chopped off the top one, haven't I? That's soprano there. Inverted sort of shape. So it's sort of that big, it goes somewhere and comes back and returns to that point. Perhaps a little bit like life. When we die, no, that's probably going a bit too English on you, isn't it? When you die, you're potentially reborn as something else.
That's philosophy. That's philosophy.
Or you return to the earth, and who knows, you might.
Reincarnation.
Yeah. Anyway, so where I was going with that was here.
Oh, it's life is a simulation.
Pretty much all the same stuff. There's just they're staggering the layers coming in, just for that effect.
I'm sorry.
And if I go here,
Stop.
guys, another big pitch thing to talk about. Another big pitch thing to talk about is at the end here. So what's going on there? Do you remember?
Retard.
Well, yeah, there is a retardando, I think. Yeah. So it's chord 4 to chord 1. And do you have a look at? Oh my God!
Oh,
Sorry.
hi.
It's gone fast, hasn't it? Figured bass. Do you remember figured bass? So we're in the key of D. We add a sharp 3 and a 5 on, so you get D, F sharp, A, and you can see that D, D, A, F sharp, D. That's like D major. D major.
What's it called when the whole piece is in the minor and then on the last note it ends in the...
I will spell this wrong. Tears to Picardy. So tears to Picardy is like a compositional device where it goes from, so that's a minor to a major key. Yeah. Tears to Picardy to me in this context, there's two things. So chord 4 to 1 is called a plagal cadence. It's called a church cadence. So every time I can't write. Every time in church, at the end of hymns, it'll always, when they say Amen, end like that. Every single time. What does Amen mean? It's like that.
I agree.
Is it an I agree?
I mean to agree.
I won't argue with that because I have no idea. It's sort of like a final, like, I think Darcy means like this shall be or something, like this shall be, as in like final. So that's like a cadence means final.
Would you like to say amen?
Oh, I think amen.
It means like, yeah, I agree, amen.
Yeah. Okay.
So like when somebody says something, you're like, amen.
Yeah.
Cool. What else? We move on. You've got that. Okay, so amen. You've got that immediate association with church, and it's about death, dying. So you can make it that link there. It's a tears to Picardy at the end, so it's almost like dead, but actually the effect. Sorry, I should play the minor to the major version. So you've got. So here's the chords. So like you should hear. Okay, so that's 4 to 1 in a minor key. But if I go 4 to 1 in a major key, it sounds more final, doesn't it? It's like I'm dead, pretty much to me. It's like
It means
complete
so
death.
be it. I looked it up.
So be it. That's
So
it. I
be
knew
it,
it was
yeah.
all shall be or something. So be it. I'm dead. So 4-1, but minor to major is really convincing. The fact that it's really drawn out, like that's really long. We've got the writ there as well. So slowing it down. There's quite a bit there in terms of the harmony. If you go back here, like just look at this chromatic sort of movement again. That's, well, it's not chromatic, but just that sort of fluid sort of motion. So it's all like littered throughout the whole piece. So I think with this one, you're also picking out some major things for it, major like themey sort of ideas, and then just taking them out of the score where you can. Is that cool for now? Cool.
So is that TS to Piccadilly literally when the whole piece is in minor and goes to major three?
Like, actually there are little shades of major in the piece where, like within minor tonality, there are major chords that exist. So they do use those. But in terms of the general sense of this is a minor piece, but then it ends in major, that's what it is to Piccadilly is. We did it last year, James, sorry, so just so you know. What was it? Yeah, it was last year. So Brock Fugal often ended that before. Hey guys, what about expressive devices? Oh, guys, so in terms of any chords, you really only need, like that's probably the only chord I'd actually analyse in the piece, because the type of chord by letter name isn't really important. The fact that it's chromatic and moves this way is important though. So, but it is important here to specify the two chords. Okay, so you've got D major. And what would be the fourth if you go up from D major? If you wanted to work that out. What have you got? G, D, G, D. G, D, G.
G, B, G, D.
So it's G. So G minor to D major is your 4-1. So they're the only two chords that actually specify what they are, apart from saying the piece is in D minor. The fact that you say this is the chromatic movement in this line is much more important. Cool. Hey, what are we up to? Expressive devices? What expressive devices are in there?
Crescendos.
Yeah.
There's a little fortes and pianos at the start.
Yeah, so don't forget, that's exactly right. Don't forget, like dynamics are expressive devices, softs and louds.
What's it called when there's no crescendo? There's actually just like piano,
That's
piano, and then forte. It's
So terraced.
Terraced. Yeah.
Terrace. So there's a few types of dynamics in there. There's standard garden variety dynamics, and then there's terrace dynamics. That's the only type actually. So there's like standard, and then that terrace. So it might be no indication it's going to get really loud, but here obviously you hear it getting louder, like gradually. So both of those happen as well. We mentioned, what did we mention also? Legato is potentially an expressive device, like typically played smoothly. I don't know if that's marked on the score though, actually. Might be somewhere. It is legato anyway. Crescendo marking you can see here. Dynamic marking. So I think what I think what it does is it works in conjunction with all of the other elements happening, doesn't it? Like just because it's loud or goes from here to loud, or strong I should say, doesn't make it convincingly sad. But when it's tense chromatically within there, when it's climbing up in pitch, even when the fact that it's with like choral voices and it sounds like angelic almost, that really makes it more convincing. So like you're looking at the interrelationships there. They've got an expressive device, they've got a pitch thing, a durational thing because it's slow, timbre thing because timbral thing because it's a voice. Yep, cool. Any other expressive things in there? Wouldn't imagine there's heaps.
Rita.
What'd you call me? Yes, there is. I've been waiting for months for that one. Okay, yeah, so there's a retardando at the end. Just exactly as the word uses an insult means. If you're like a retard, you're slow, aren't you? So it's when the music slows down, it's retarded. Retarded. Fire retarded, like if I chuck that on a fire, it'll retard or slow its growth. So it's slow, it's there, so it's a rit. So you'll often see it as rit. I often see it as that as well. But
Because
yeah.
it's written and retard, isn't it?
Well, they just do the whole word, yeah. So retard. So it's the same thing. Cool. that's pretty much it for expressive devices. It's really simple. They work in conjunction with other things. What else are we looking at? Timbre. Timbre's a big one, actually, I think, in terms of the voices to use, like the choral voices. So if you're writing a piece about death and impending death and that churchy kind of, like it's a requiem, so it's like music for death, essentially. Like choral would be where my mind would go straight away. If you said write a piece for a big grand funeral, like choral, I wouldn't go, whoa, what are you thinking there, choral? I'd be, yeah, good choice, kind of thing. A lot of it's dictated by the period it was written as well, but nonetheless, choral writing and a string sort of accompaniment predominantly makes it sound both quite fragile, or strings is quite fragile in this context because of, again, here's the interrelationships, because they don't play on the beat, the melody anyway, that it's put in quite a high pitch range, it sounds a bit fragile. But then the voices also sound a mix between fragility because it's soft and intense, high in pitch, low in pitch, where the bass expands out like this. But they're also very powerful and commanding at the same time. So whilst they climb up, you know that bit we were looking at before? You can sort of, like, you could go either way with this argument too. It's like, obviously the pitch is climbing, it's getting louder. The durational values are lengthening as well. It's becoming more intense because of the chromatic movement within it. Oh, where was I going with this? What was I talking about? Oh, timbre. Yeah, so timbre. So it sounds like quite direct and pointed. Then they're quite open and powerful here. But then you sort of turn the page essentially, and it's back to this really sort of weaker, sort of fluid sort of sound. The soprano voice always sticks out at the top, kind of thing. You don't really listen. You just hear a wall of sound underneath, and you listen to the soprano line. So it's quite fragile because of how high it actually is up in the range as well. So that's quite, like, life's fragile as well. Life's really fragile. So the piece in elements of it sounds quite fragile as well. Like it's really, some not quite, like the melody stuff isn't anyway like super convincingly strong all the time. Or it goes through moments where it swells up and then goes, in the face of death, oh crap, okay, I'm actually going to die, kind of thing. It's almost like the sense of I'm going to beat it here, or I'm like resolved enough to go, no, or you're accepting, and then you sort of panic again, is what I get out of it. So for me, this piece is like tension, what am I trying to say? It's like tension that resolves, or panic that increases, and then you sort of accept it, and then you're like, you just accept it, then you start to panic again, kind of thing. So it sort of contracts and expands the music all the time. Awesome. Anything else timbre? Timbre. Oh my god, I missed it. Timbre-wise?
I have not to, but
yeah.
I don't know if this is right, but you know that term where the lyrics show, no, the note.
Oh, word painting.
Yes, thank
yeah.
you.
Yeah.
Could that be used in C verses? I don't
Yeah.
know. Is that goodbye?
I don't know. But that's a very good point. I haven't even looked into that side.
I know. But like it has resurrect there, and in the other,
Yeah,
it sort
definitely.
of rises and
Yep.
then goes down.
Yeah, that's excellent.
So it's word painting.
Definitely. So resurrection is about like the strength and propping up kind of thing. Yeah, and then so it's word painting. Because it's in Latin, I have no idea what it says half the time. But I did give her a translation on one of the sheets earlier as well. So you could definitely, that's a really good thing to look into. Where would that go? Probably a pitch thing when you're talking about melody. Really quickly, texture. We're pretty much done anyway. Texture. What would you say about texture? Thick, thin?
It can be really like thin, but also really thick.
Yeah, it's like contrast again, isn't it? Like it's quite thin and delicate versus thick and powerful. But most of the time it's homophonic, so it's like one voice, isn't it? Or one main idea, which is the top soprano line. Okay, nothing else gets in the way or competes with that. The only thing that competes with it at all is the little string line, but that's an accompanying figure. It's not like a melody as such. Okay, so it's mainly homophonic or single idea. Because it's about one person's death, one man's death. or one man sort of journey or like send off kind of thing. So it's going to be focused on him, kind of, and it's very focused on one idea as well. This piece.
I suppose you could argue the texture sort of maps what someone who is sad would be feeling. Like
Yeah,
they're
definitely.
really like small texture, they're feeling fragile. It builds up and
Yeah,
they get
definitely.
more emotional.
You know that what I was saying before about like you're tense and panicked and versus like strong and no, I've got this. That texture follows that same map as well. Yeah, that's exactly right. This section here. So it's where you gain that confidence or that resolution, like no, or acceptance maybe, or I don't know if you're challenging it, but you're accepting it, and then here it starts to become questionable again. Like that's a textural thing happens as well as dynamics, as well as pitch, as well as everything. Cool. Guys, the last one I had was structure. Structure doesn't really, I almost never talk about structure because it sort of doesn't really matter. If I zoomed out and looked at the structure of the piece as a whole, you'll find that basically it has, like you've got, this is potentially like an A sort of section here. It depends how you break it up as well. There's like a variation of A sort of that comes in there. It's very focused on that one sort of idea. So it's not really a case where you go, the structure convincingly makes it sad. It's just repeated ideas, essentially, is all we're looking at there. So sort of dismiss it as anything really important. You might want to talk about structure in terms of that arch structure per bar or per like little fragment. We had, you know how we had, not this is not the example, but up, up, down, down, up, down kind of thing, or the general sort of sense of the melody going like that. That's like a little arch or breathing sort of shape. I didn't finish that word. A breathing sort of shape, so it sort of goes up like this. That gives it a sense of structure. Or the little chunks of music that keep repeating give it structure. But all that's doing is confirming the idea. Thanks.
Can you argue that, say, for expressive devices and structure working together, it's
Yeah.
like the whole piece is kind of like a breathing pattern?
Definitely, yeah, I would. Yeah. Cool. Guys, was that helpful?
Yeah,
It's like that
definitely.
actually went really fast. I feel like I'm just scratching the surface a bit. I think most of that stuff we've talked about are the major things to talk about. And you might look at that chromatic part that I've talked about and go, well, yeah, and there's one here and one here, and oh, that's where there's a big leap, so that's more tense for this reason. So I've essentially just tried to pick away the main chunks of it for you. And you can take all those chunky bits and reassemble them, Odd Squad style, into different things to make a new device. Rana knows Odd Squad. Do you know Odd Squad? Yeah, Odd Squad. You know where they make little devices? They're like, oh, I need a 10 to unlock the doors. I'm like, oh, I've got a 6. What would make a 10? And they grab the 4, put it together. That's your bits of analysis go to stick into one idea. Cool. All good. Thanks so much, guys.
Yeah, all those numbers, like I grab the 10.